Howdy folks. This is Father Dougal 9000 here, and welcome to another episode of Game Finish Trios, a series where I talk about the games I've played and beaten, as part of the Hardcore Gaming 101 Forums Game Finish Challenge. Yes, I'm still using text-to-speech for the opening, but it's a special episode, so that hopefully offsets things. It's the 60th episode of the series, which is crazy to think about. I admittedly say that every 10 episodes, so maybe it's not as special at this point. But still, I'm thankful to be doing this, even if at a more irregular and haphazard pace than where I was a year ago, and I hope everyone watching these enjoys them. All 12 of you. Now let's get started with the show, shall we?
Space Jam, A New Legacy, the game, for the Xbox Series? Yeah, Xbox Series, that'll do. So this is an interesting one in that it's the first game I've beaten on an Xbox Series console for this challenge. And it's my first co-op game as well. I was over at my sister's yesterday for a good chunk of the day and we decided to play something for a while. So we went with this game since it was free. It's a beat-em-up based on the somewhat infamous Space Jam: A New Legacy movie, but it's got something of a curious history behind it. Around December 2020, an online competition was held where people could pitch a Space Jam 2 video game idea, and one of these would be turned into an actual game. The winner was this beat-em-up, in which you play as Bugs Bunny, Lola Bunny, or James LeBron, why not, and fight enemies with a combination of fists and your basketball. It's a surprisingly solid, if basic, game for its genre, with a standard early 90s moveset for every character. Attack, do a jump attack, a special attack, and a dash attack. You got a bunch of unlockable cards that provide buffs and bonuses, and there's even an unconventional 3-player co-op option that puts me in mind of a Konami beat-em-up. I even really dig how the basketball can bounce off enemies and be quickly swapped in between your normal moves. It adds a unique dynamism to the combat. The animation's also quite good. It's doing its best to establish a sense of personality to each character's animations despite them all sharing the same movesets. When dribbling the ball, Lola's idle animation has her hunched and dribbling the ball between each hand very quickly, while Bugs' animation is just standing still, calmly bouncing the ball with one hand as the other's behind his back. It's a very cool way of establishing Lola's quietly fierce determination and Bugs' laid-back self-confidence. Yeah, I got this. Level design's fairly good. It's offering a basic mix of enemies and navigational obstacles like electric fences and landmines to keep you on your toes. My sister and I never found ourselves getting bored or finding a section to be too long, though you don't fight more than one enemy type for the first couple of stages, and that's pretty lame. There aren't even any recolors of that basic enemy type, which is very odd considering that's fairly dime a dozen for beat-em-ups. The game's generally quite short, in a way that feels maybe a bit too straightforward and quick. I kinda wish the other Looney Tunes had appeared outside of those card summons, particularly Daffy, he's just not here in the game. Maybe if you play some super hard difficulty setting, maybe he shows up, but otherwise he's just not there, and it's so strange. But considering how quickly this had to have taken to make, with only a small development team, I think this came out 6 or 7 months after that competition, I can understand why this is so short. I have no idea if anything will ever come out of this, but there's a good foundation for a great beat-em-up if that team had the chance to do their own thing, either as a Looney Tunes game or their own creation. Hey, you know what? At least we got one definitively and arguably good thing out of that whole Space Jam 2 debacle. That thing is otherwise a waste of time. Good lord. Good on you, Digital Eclipse, you good mad lads. Fallout New Vegas. New Vegas? Fallout New Vegas for the Xbox 360. Well, this says far and beyond taking the award for longest game I've played this year. It took 19 hours and 34 minutes. And that was me rushing through the thing as well. But hey, it's quite the cool video game too, so that's good. I remember playing this for like 9 or 10 hours back in 2015, 2016, but I gave up for whatever reason. I hadn't even managed to reach the strip yet. I was barely like a quarter or a third of the way into this thing. I decided to give it another bash a few weeks ago, assuming that if I took the same main quest only approach that I took with Oblivion months ago, it would be a relaxing but brisk enough playthrough. Evidently not. That's partially because you can't fast travel to undiscovered locations, you have to walk everywhere, but it's also because of how flipping dense the main quest alone is. Right, so not only do you have 4 dramatically different routes with their own unique quests you can take after that first third or so of the game, but each route involves interacting with various communities and factions and doing things for them in order to get on their good side. Plus, you'll sometimes get into a scenario where you'll want to upgrade your skills if you want quests to come out a certain way, which can involve a bit of grinding or doing side quests to help you out. It's a big game with so much in just the base campaign that I actually had to give it up for a few days near the end. I was so utterly knackered and exhausted. In spite of that, I still enjoyed my time a great deal. It's nice to just stroll around the world, encountering strange places and chatting to people with some interesting things going on. A lot of the quests I encountered offered multiple ways of completing them, taking into account what skills you have and how you'd like to roleplay your particular character. So each quest feels unique in what you end up doing. There's plenty of charmingly odd stuff, like everything to do with the Kings, a gang in the New Vegas who model themselves on Elvis Presley derived entirely from old recordings, or the ski resort that houses a community of super mutants. Obviously there's way more to see that I didn't check out, and maybe I'll go back to them at some point. My only real criticism, and the one thing keeping me from coming back, is how often the game started crashing after about 15 or so hours on the 360. I had to clear the system cache a couple of times because apparently that can accumulate quite a bit, but it still ran into this issue somewhat regularly by the end, and oh man, that's a shame. Sonic Rush Adventure for the Nintendo DS. I made an attempt to play the original Sonic Rush back in 2012. Very curious to see the game that codified the style of gameplay that the main series adopted from Sonic Unleashed onwards. But I got stuck on the first boss in both storylines and figured I wouldn't be able to make much progress. For whatever reason, I only recently thought to give its sequel a try, as I heard it was much easier. And thankfully it was. It's still quite a challenging game with fast stages, but ultimately more forgiven with easier bosses and a lack of bottomless pits until the later zones. That made this a more approachable adventure, and one that I found myself hugely charmed by. Having the option to play as Sonic or Blaze through these levels gives you the choice to try another character if one level is giving you too much trouble. And being able to choose levels from your home base is a great idea that works well with this game's adventure focus. Basically, the levels are spread out across an open sea, and you need to acquire resources in levels to build different types of seacraft to reach those other places. Some see this as padding, and yeah, while that's fair enough, I think it works as an elegant way of encouraging the player to revisit stages and get better at the game. Because you get a set material in every zone, and you get more of them the better ranks you get, you're nudged towards becoming better at the game, to acquire more materials more quickly, and to see the rest of the game. Having to not sail back and forth between islands to replay stages is such a lovely option with that in mind. If you gotta grind, fair enough, but will not make it an embuggerance. Now, in terms of game completion, I got the normal ending by just playing through the game. I didn't get the best ending, which involves getting all of the Chaos Emeralds, which are won by beating local speedster Johnny in jet ski races, and the Soul Emeralds, which are won by replaying certain bosses and levels via the mission mode, as it honestly got too tough on both counts. I got 4 Chaos Emeralds and 5 Soul Emeralds, but Johnny's speed's too far ahead of you, and the stages I needed to beat to unlock the missions were too tricky for me. However, the best ending consists of extra cutscenes and a final boss battle, so yeah, I'm happy to consider this beaten. It's been ages since I played a Sonic game that was entirely new to me, and I really enjoyed Rush Adventure. Levels are brief, but dense with routes encouraging you to experiment with the game's mechanics. The trick system adds a good bit of depth by giving you extra boost, and most of the gimmicks you'll encounter complement that system. The story is surprisingly well directed, with a good script and solid use of sliding character portraits to get a real sense of charisma out of the characters and their adventure. The overworld, with its hidden islands and material gathering, was quite enjoyable as well, though I totally understand that it can get in the way of the main game if that's how you view the levels. In a way, this reminded me a bunch of Sonic Unleashed, in that you gotta see the game as the whole, what everything builds up to, rather than the sum of its parts, to really enjoy it in totality, rather than ignoring the bits you don't like. Unleashed is my favorite 3D Sonic, and one of my favorite Sonic games in general, so that says a lot about how I consider Rush Adventure. I definitely recommend it if you can roll with the seafaring sections and material gathering.